ask you to pull this. We don't have to wait on them for that response the way we do all our other projects.
All right, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yeah, we hear you well.
Cool. All right, so I'm John Marvin, fish habitat biologist, Yakama Nation Fisheries, Yakama Klickitat Fisheries project, working on habitat protection and restoration in the Yakama River Basin off reservation. So as Michael had said, we presented this last year under 22-1485. So right at the cusp, was offered partial funding, but declined that partially because we were still working through the permitting phases of the project, and just wanted to share the funds with the projects below us that we're ready to move forward.
I'm just advancing the slides for you, John, but let me know.
You might use that double arrow under the X's.
So right.
You're right, all the way on the right side.
Oh, that?
Yep.
Oh, got it. Okay, great. Let's make sure everybody online is seeing this as well.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
So to start, so Tieton River, River Mile 4.3 from the confluence of the Tieton and Natchez River. Next slide. Steelhead. This is a steelhead project. Steelhead aren't doing so hot as some of the data that Zach showed for little Natchez. That would goes likely across the basin. Recent years of significant decline. Next slide, please. So Tieton River, downstream of the Tieton Dam, built in 1925. YTID diversion in 1910. Historic land clearing, riparian forest clearing, and the construction of SR-12 in the 1950s. Next slide, please. This all contributed to negatively impact the habitat in the Tieton. Obviously, dams don't do good things to rivers. We have their upside down hydrology with the flip-flop, high flows in the late summer, and the dam obviously cuts off a significant amount of sediment, and reduced sediment creates shallow incision and altered flow regimes and reduced transport. Next slide, please. Lower Tieton below the dam has a significantly smaller drainage pattern with more intermittent streams and less perennial streams, so even more or reduced sediment loads compared to the upper watershed. Next slide, please. Just a kind of a comparison of a similar project that was implemented on the Cleolum River, just below the Cleolum Dam. Similar hydrology, different timing, similar issues of stream degradation, and that project has been pretty successful. Next slide, please. So just kind of some of these impacts. Wood clearing, obviously, simplified habitat, lack of cover, less woody debris. There's a significant deficit of spawning gravels in the lower Tieton River. Less complexity and all the other jazz when you don't have wood. Next slide, please. SR-12 oftentimes goes right up to the floodplain, constraining the floodplain, cutting off meanders and side channels, and revetted rock highway with not much or any riparian vegetation. Next slide, please. So in summary, channel confinement, lack of spawning sediments, and lack of woody supply and flow regulation disconnected the sort of from its floodplain. It's pretty coarse sediment out there. Minor pockets of spawning gravels. It's a pretty simple system. Not many pools and less cover. Next slide, please. But oddly enough, so in the soil recovery plan, Tieton was kind of written off, triage, so to speak, of probably not worth working with. But through Yakama Nation's VSP, Viable Salmonid Population Studies, they actually found that there is a significant steelhead use in the Tieton. Chris Fredrickson referred to it as potentially the cornerstone of the steelhead population for the Natchez River. Next slide, please. So there's just some data from the VSP highlighting the Tieton River and locations of radio tagged spawners. Next slide, please. And then just, again, a distribution of the spawners within the Tieton River. So most are in the lower 10 miles. Yeah, next slide, please. So in 2016, we contracted for an assessment of the lower 6 miles. So basically everything on the Oak Creek Wildlife Area or Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife managed lands. So just evaluating reach conditions, limiting factors, potential restoration project opportunities, infrastructure issues, and then a ranking. Next slide, please. Oh, other way. Keep going, please. Keep going.
One more?
No, keep going. You're going the wrong way.
No.
Summary findings. So basically, we were able to identify 13 restoration opportunity areas, with 7 identified as a high priority with further analysis. If implementing all 13, we could reconnect over 3 miles of historic side channels by installing a variety of wood and rock structures, restoring 47 acres of riparian habitat, and 35 acres of floodplain revegetation. Next slide, please. So there's the map of the lower 6 miles for the assessment and the reach breaks. Next slide, please. And here's the identification of the 13 potential restoration opportunities with the highlight of opportunity number 4. Next slide, please. Okay, and there's just the table from the assessment. So we chose the area number 4 because it had the highest ecological uplift, ranked highest out of all the other 13 and the prioritized 7. Might as well start with the biggest one. Next slide, please. So this was the conceptual from the assessment that was presented last year. Through discussions and questions through the application process, it was, instead of the 3 inlet channels, it was reduced to a single inlet channel. Next slide, please. Just an aerial view of the project area. Next slide. Nice little historical photo from '49. Next slide, please. So an elevation model of the project area. If you notice the dark purple on the southeast side, that is the side channel that this project will be tapping into as part of the restoration. Next slide, please. So as part of the assessment, we had some habitat suitability index analyses, flow patterns, hydraulic parameters, and inundation extent, a baseline for the existing hydraulic conditions and comparing to the proposed conditions, to ensure that the elements are maximizing habitat and fish benefits without increasing risk to existing habitat, property or infrastructure. Next slide, please. So these are some of the examples from the HSI. I need to pull up my version because I can't read those. Those are too tiny. Here we go. On the right with the red, so that's looking at existing. So the first box is existing conditions. Box below that is proposed conditions, and then change in conditions, and that's habitat suitability. That is the full habitat suitability. The columns on the right are looking at depth, with existing at the top, proposed depth in the middle, and then a change in condition in the far right corner. Next slide, please. So this, as I said previously, this design was funded under Project 19-1447 with the goals of improving steelhead spawning and rearing to induce flow into a side channel. And so utilizing a historic channel but inducing flow into that will create over a half-mile of new side channel habitat. So project objectives: increase spawning and rearing, increase perennial channel length and wetted area, increasing extent of the gravels and substrate for spawning, increasing shade and cover, floodplain connectivity, and area of floodplain wetlands. Next slide, please. So this project will increase 2,280 feet of side channel habitat. So it cuts an 800-foot side channel inlet into that existing side channel with about 3,000 cubic yards of material. There's an engineered boulder riffle right at the head of the side channel excavation to raise the water level to induce flow into the side channel. An engineered log jam apex structure at the head of the channel. We're going to sort the sediments or the excavated material on site and put a gravel nourishment bar downstream with approximately 1,000 cubic yards. The bar is about 600 feet in length and it will extend 25 feet into the Tieton River to provide additional spawning sediments downstream of the project. Project will add a 4.9 acre increase in floodplain inundation, 2.9 acres of riparian revegetation, and the project requires realignment of the Tieton Nature Trail. Next slide, please. This was kind of happening last year. My apologies for not being able to make it to the site view last year. But through the ESA consultations and our NEPA process, there were concerns of stranding and mortality due to shallow flow and icing. The side channel is not designed to be perennial. It is designed to be inundated at or above 200 CFS. We're proposing to do construction in the winter during low flow, during the irrigation season and flip-flop. And both of these clarifications have been added to the basis of design report in the final plan set. Next slide, please. So just some of the documents. There's a hazard assessment. Next slide. The basis of design report is updated as of October of 22. Next slide, please. Just kind of a schematic of the project overview. The boulder riffle on kind of the far left. The sediment nourishment bar downstream of that. You can see the inlet and where the channel excavation will occur, 880 feet to connect in with the existing side channel. And then kind of the trail realignment. The trail currently kind of goes through where the side channel would be, so the trail would be aligned to the canyon wall. Next slide, please. Just some of the design elements and project benefits. This is all in the basis of design report. Next slide, please. I have a synopsis of the trail realignment, getting it out of the floodplain and the channel. This is a pretty popular trail and all year round, even in the winter time. So Fish and Wildlife, as the property manager, is concerned with the recreational impact. So the designs took great care to address the trail realignment. Next slide, please. So just some of the outcomes of the hydraulic analyses, looking at existing conditions and proposed conditions. So on the left, we're looking at depth. So existing at 219 CFS, proposed to the right. At the proposed condition, you can see the side channel being activated at 219. The next row is existing at depth with the 1 year and proposed at the 1 year. So currently not being activated at all, and pretty significant activation at the 1 year level. Next slide, please. So here's velocity, existing condition, proposed velocity 219. So spreading out, providing more habitat at those variety of flows. Again, velocity with existing and proposed, so providing some off-channel habitat, especially during flip-flop when it gets pretty ripping. This will give a place for the juveniles to get out of those flows. Next slide, please. Depth existing at the 10 year, and then you see proposed to the right there, so you're getting some significant floodplain watering, feeding into some forested floodplain wetlands. And then the bottom row is existing depth at the 100 year, so even more significant floodplain inundation. Next slide, please. Oh, and I need to get to my original here. I'm sorry, I can't read that one either. Where are we at here? Okay, so proposed condition flow distribution between the main stem and the side channel. So low flows at 62. Survey flows. So proposed conditions, velocities, kind of a repeat of kind of what I showed previously. Just greater inundation of the floodplain, watering of riparian wetlands, and providing off-channel habitat. Next slide, please. So then again, just another overview of full impacts, the change from existing to proposed, existing conditions in blues, and then the proposed. So this is the 4.9 increase in floodplain inundation and the 2,200 feet of side channel activation. Next slide, please. And then, so just kind of analysis of fish use between the proposed condition and existing condition with the variety of sizes of steelhead young. So overall, an uplift in habitat availability for different life stages of the steelhead juveniles. Next slide, please. Okay, as part of our process, permit processing to the Corps, we had to provide a functional uplift assessment because we're putting water into wetlands, so they want to generally know what's that going to do for those wetlands. So the project overall provides improved floodplain connectivity with elevated functions in the identified wetlands A and B. Sediment nourishment bar, provides much needed sand, gravel, spawning materials downstream of the project. Boulder Riffle itself will provide locally improved aquatic habitat with pool development and sediment retention, and in conjunction with the engineered logjam for pool habitat at the mouth of the side channel. All three components restore frequency and extent of riverine hydrology, basically putting more water on the floodplain and the wetlands. Off-channel habitat, areas become connected more regularly. Like I said, it's designed to not be interacted at the 200 CFS. It's regularly above 200 CFS, except during winter low flows. But what as it evolves over time, hopefully it'll find a nice equilibrium where there'd be even more habitat available out throughout the year. And it's restoration of the riparian zone and floodplain wetlands. Next slide, please. So just kind of some of the design aspects. Here's the cover sheet for the design set. Next slide, please. So just kind of where access is from the parking lot, where the footbridge is, a temporary bridge, using the trail as much as possible for access. And the black areas are the wetlands A and B. Next slide, please. So you can see the engineered boulder riffle to kind of the left there, the log apex structure, the extent of the side channel excavation, access routes, and where the spoils that we can't use in the nourishment bar or as ballast for the ELJ. There's some spoiled areas outside of the 100-year floodplain. Next slide, please. Just the schematic of the engineered log jam. Next slide, please. And the engineered boulder ripple. Next slide. This is the riparian re-veg and re-veg of the access routes. Next slide, please. And then here's the construction cost estimates. And I believe that is it. I can take some questions if we still have time.
Yeah, I think we have 7 to 8 minutes probably for questions. Are there any? Any questions from folks online?
Hey, John, this is Luke from Yakama County. Is there going to be any sorting of the material used in the gravel nourishment bar, or is that just going to be all the material excavated?
No, it'll be sorted. Yeah, it's in the BOD for the size classes, adequate for steelhead spawning. And then what doesn't meet those size classes, there are the two different spoils areas on site outside of the 100-year floodplain.
Okay.
Just reading a comment from Elizabeth. One of the comments from the Surfboard Statewide Technical Review Panel for 2022 application was that the explanation around not adding roughness and cover via LWD additions to the top of the side channel provides a better understanding of the design. However, the sponsor could consider pre-staging appropriate sized woody debris on the supply and staging. This could avoid access issues later on and offer opportunity for placement of small debris jams to provide complexity and cover after sediment sorting has occurred. And so Elizabeth's question looks like, does the 23 application incorporate this recommendation? Could be prepared to respond to that at site visits next week.
Okay, no, that's actually, I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me of that, Elizabeth. That's a great idea. That would be, I don't know if we would need to add to the budget. Maybe we could just have them leave a couple of extra logs out there that we could just grip hoist in at a later time. So there's no woody debris proposed for the excavated side channel to make sure sediment doesn't build up in it and it becomes plugged again. So until it finds that equilibrium with flows and sorting as it evolves over time. But yeah, no, that's actually a great idea.
And John, we've talked before, but this design uses a constructed side channel that connects out lower down to some of the old relic channels. What drove the choice of choosing that upper constructed channel versus using the relic channels just below it that head in the same direction?
Well, any of the three that were in the conceptual would require some sort of excavation. This one does require the most excavation, but it also provides for the most channel length and therefore the most habitat availability. With the conceptual, there were 3, and so for cost considerations, instead of 3 separate, and when we decided to go with just a single excavated channel, we thought it would be best to just provide the greatest lengthened channel, and it goes through an area that has little to no vegetation in it. Some of the other options for excavation would require to go through pretty dense riparian forest.
Other questions from John?
John, are you doing any deep planting with the stinger method of riparian plants, or what's the planting methods?
A variety of planting methods. Yes, there are for some of the deep. It's pretty cobbly up there, so we'll do our best. I think in the excavated channel might behoove us to use the planter, the stinger planter, but it's a mix of potted and deep plantings. And there's just to, so I don't have it in front of me, but there's in the basic design report, there's a whole section on the planting plan and species identified, because it's kind of an odd mix out there. You could step on a prickly pear in one step and a rose bush in the next. So, you know, a dry East Cascade, but there's also some really gorgeous legacy oak trees out there. So it's kind of, yeah, complicated. And I think this came up last year. It's 25 feet on each side of the excavated channel for that 800-foot length. And kind of due to the arid conditions of where the side channel is excavated, like I said, there's hardly any vegetation there now. It's pretty arid, bunch grasses. And so, yeah, that's the planting plan in a couple of sentences.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Cool.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, John, for presenting this project. Again, looking forward to getting out to the site next week.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll see you then.
Take care. Bye. And now we have Tim. Tim, correct me if